I love Spain so much that I interrupted my Asia Pacific tour to come to Spain, and then I go back to my Asia Pacific tour to finish it off with Singapore. That's how much I love Spain. Okay. So I have, like I said, I have one line in my talk translated, so I hope I do this well. So, a mejor manera de predictor el futuro es creero. Was that right? So that's the essence of my talk about the future of Java, is that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And working with Java technology, you have the opportunity to do so, unlike other technology languages that are out there. So let's see. I think you already introduced me, so I'm the chairperson of the Java community process. I've worked with the Java platform since starting at Sun Microsystems back in 2000. I spend a lot of my time traveling around the world visiting with different Java developer communities. I am, though, originally from California, and that's where I spend my time when I'm not traveling around, but I do particularly enjoy visiting different communities. My first time ever in Madrid, although I've been to Spain several times, never been to Madrid before, so I'm hoping we're going to have some time for me to see some of the sites tomorrow. If anything I don't cover here you don't have a chance to talk to me about, you can follow up with me on Twitter. Her name is HeatherVanCura. So while I have been working with Java for a long time, I think it's a little bit unique. Why stay with something so long? The Java community is what makes it interesting. The fact that Java has continued language. We've grown to have millions of developers all around the world, with 38 billion active JVMs, and 21 billion of those are actually connected to the cloud. And that really is the focus and priority for the Java platform moving forward, is to make it the ideal environment for clouding. And I think we'll continue to do that in the same way that we've done over the last 20 years. And I think this really is why you see Java continue, even though the environment has changed a little bit, in that now oftentimes developers, you'll have different languages that you use. You don't just know how to program in Java. Usually you'll have one or two other languages as well, which is totally fine. I mean, that's the environment that developers are working in these days, but for certain jobs, there really is, not too many other tools that can solve certain problems in terms of robustness or scalability and security. And that really is because of these philosophies that have remained consistent over time, since even the days back in when Sun Microsystems was the steward of Java, in terms of ensuring that the platform's complete, that we have any changes that ensure the last 2 years effort to really modernize the platform and bring in more innovation quickly. And I'll share with you a little bit about how we're doing that. But also maintaining the backwards compatibility of the platform. That really is what grows that active ecosystem that we have around Java. That's really what makes Java so popular, is the fact that it's not about any one particular company. And though I do work at Oracle, and so I do, am a little bit biased in my view, but I think that Oracle has been a good steward of Java. That's a question I often get, especially since I came back from the days of Sun Microsystems. And I think that Oracle has come to realize that the value of Java is greater than anything that they can provide, that it really is a partnership with the community, that Java would not be as successful or valuable or be as popular with developers if it wasn't for the community and the active ecosystem involvement that is enabled with Java through the Java Community Process Program. And that's why the Java Community Process remains so central to the evolution of the Java platform, and will remain so in the coming years. So we're getting ready to celebrate 20 years of the Java Community Process Program moving forward, and the Java Community Process will continue to be the mechanism for evolving Java moving forward, working together with the Java community to do that, with the vendors and with individual developers, as well as user groups like yourself. So who is familiar with the Java community process or knows what it is? few of you, that's actually more than most groups I talk to. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes doing a brief overview of what is the JCP program, and then I'll go into, the things that the organization is focusing on. So essentially, the Java community process oversees the evolution of technologies in the JavaX namespace. And we do that in cooperation with the developer community, so developers like you. I chair the organization, and I have a small staff that supports me in doing that, but I do that in cooperation with a board. We call that the executive committee, and the executive committee's role is to vote on all of the JSRs, so Java technologies that go into the Java platform, either as the Java standard platform itself or any standalone optional packages that are in the Java namespace. But the bulk of the work underneath and done by the JCP is done by the project leads, so by members of the JCP program. And those are done by specification leads, also JSR expert group members, and Java community members. They do the bulk of the work of the Java community process, and we do that in open source projects because Java is now an open source language. So we do this in an open source fashion, but at the same time we do it through the organized mechanisms of the Java community process, which I'll explain a little bit about to you. So starting with the executive committee, it's a 25-person board, and it's elected by the JCP program membership. JCP membership's open to any Java developer, so different ways you can participate. And a representation of the executive committee is reflected naturally by the community who votes for these members. Every year we have our annual elections. We have corporate members, both the vendors, so companies like IBM, Red Hat, and Oracle, those types of companies, but also companies that are consuming the technology. So like this picture, for example, is one of our face-to-face meetings that was held at Twitter, who's also on the board. So we rotate where we meet. We meet every other month. And then also we have nonprofits like the Eclipse Foundation and the Apache Software Foundation and Java user groups. So Java user group like yourself. Currently on a board we have a London Java community and the Brazilian community, which they call themselves So Java, and a couple of individual developers represented on the executive committee. So those are the folks that evolve the program itself as well as vote on all of the JSRs that become part of the Java platform. And does anybody know what a JSR is? Has anyone ever heard of the term JSR as you're going about your work? I'm sure you have, but you might not necessarily know what it is, and that's really common because you don't necessarily need to know what it is in order to do your work. But this is established as really the foundation of the JCP because a Java specification request in its definition outlined by the JCP program itself is setting out 3 deliverables that every thing that goes into the Java platform must have before it can be put into any shipping products or any Java projects in production. And it has 3 things. So a JSR is more than just the code. The reference implementation is the code, but it also requires that you have a specification. So that's why Java is one of the most thoroughly documented languages out there, because it's actually required by the structure of the JCP before anything can be declared final and voted on by the executive committee. It needs to have a complete and final specification as well as a reference implementation, which is the code, and then a test suite. So the test suite is set up to ensure that we can have more than one implementation. The reference implementation is one implementation of a standard, but the way we have it set up in the JCP is those 3 deliverables work together to enable an entire ecosystem of choice for not only for customers but also for you as developers. So that means that vendors can come and take a specification once it's declared as final and develop their own implementation, run it against the TCK, and then declare it as a compatible implementation. So that's what creates the whole ecosystem of choice and implementations that we enjoy in the Java developer community, those three things working together, and that's set up to be a requirement through the Java community process. Anything that goes into the Java platform has to have all three of those things. And it's required also that we do that as an international effort, so that means that we can't just be talking to people in North America or only North America and Europe, but people and developers from all over the world. So that's part of why in my role it's important that I go out and make sure that we're bringing in participation from all different parts of the world, so that comments that we receive about how we evolve the Java platform are coming from a broad base of different types of developers in different parts of the world. Because while there is a lot of commonality in developer communities that I've found as I go out and meet with groups of user groups around the world, there still are often differences. So it's important to get those different use cases in so that we can ensure that changes that we make over time will be impactful and helpful and useful for the entire community. And then finally, my last slide on what is the JCP is open standards and open source. So since Java was open sourced and available under an open source license now over 10 years ago, back in 2006, that still begs the question, well, Java's open source, why can't it just be an open source project? Why do we still need the JCP? Why do we need a standard? Why can't it just be an open source project? And we continue to maintain, and we will continue to evolve the Java platform, maintaining that we need both a standard and open source, and the structure that we have laid out through the JCP enables us to have both developed as an open source project, but still as a JSR having those that complete specification, so the standard component of it, as well as the test suite, to ensure that we have multiple compatible implementations and reducing the risk of fragmentation as well as incompatibilities in the marketplace. So now you know what is the JCP. I'll tell you what has been happening over the last couple of years in terms of the organization focus of the JCP, and that's really threefold. So three things that I focus on. First of all, and most importantly, rolling out new revisions of the platform, so the technology is priority number one, but then also evolving the structure of the JCP itself to keep up with the needs of the changing technology as well as the needs of developers in the community. And then lastly, how can we increase participation and feedback and collaboration from the community? So starting with the platform, focusing on OpenJDK. OpenJDK is the reference implementation for the Java platform. Who's heard of OpenJDK? Okay, more people. That's good. So you know what OpenJDK is, and you probably then know that in OpenJDK, the projects are organized as JEPs, Java Enhancement Proposals, and what happens is the JEPs feed up into JSRs, so that's often really some confusion, right? So what's a JEP, what's a JSR? So in OpenJDK, that's where the code is developed. That's the open source project where the reference implementation for the Java platform is developed. Those JEPs then feed up into a JSR for the platform. And so everything that happens in OpenJDK in a variety of JEPs then feed up into a JSR that is overseen by the Java Community Process Program and then must be by the executive committee before it can become final. And along with the reference implementation or the code developed in OpenJDK, it has to also have those other two things, the specification as well as the test suite. And then once that's approved and ratified by the executive committee, it can be released as the next version of the Java platform. So currently we're at version 12 of the Java platform. Back in 2017, we released Java 9, which was the project or platform that introduced modules or modularity into the Java platform. And what that enabled us to do at that time is to also update the Java platform to a faster release cadence. So if you've been a Java developer for any amount of time, you heard or are aware that Java platform releases would come out every 3 to 4 years. It would be a numbered release, and it would also be tied to a particular big feature. Like, for example, with Java 9, the big feature was Project Jigsaw, and it was about modularity. So with modularity, starting with Java 9 back in 2017, we were able to break apart the platform a little bit, and that it's easier now for us to introduce Java releases at a faster cadence, which helps us to bring in innovations to the platform more quickly on a 6-month release cycle basis, as well as continue to attract those younger developers who sometimes view Java as an older programming language that isn't as popular anymore, because lots of the newer languages are coming out with releases every 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. If you're using JavaScript, you have a new framework every week or so sometimes. So now this is going back to the platform philosophies, modernization and innovation. How can we do that? So this is really the foundation of how we continue to see this with the Java platform. Is modularity set the stage for us to have this faster release cadence. A couple other changes that we released along with that was the idea or concept of long-term support releases, which is also common in other communities, having the concept of long-term support releases, but that's new for Java. So moving to a faster release cadence of new releases coming out every 6 months. Not every release will be a long-term support release. We'll have long-term support releases every 3 years. So that means that Java 11 was the first long-term support release, and that means that the next long-term support release will be Java 17. And since that introduction, also the community has also come into kind of alongside supporting that model as well in offering different binary distributions, but also in that concept of a long-term support release and following the same, 11 and 17. So with the idea of introducing a long-term support release model that really, I think, encouraged more of that compatible implementation. So with the binary distributions, kind of that ability that I talked to you about with the 3 things, the RI, the spec, and the TCK, and compatible implementations, you're seeing that develop more with the Java platform and having different choices for developers to choose from with their Java platform binary distribution. And then the third thing was Oracle decided to open source many of their proprietary features in the Oracle JDK. So what that means is that essentially now there is very little difference between the Oracle JDK and OpenJDK. And they did that through the same process in OpenJDK and feeding that up through the JSR into the Java platform. And it was a gradual process, but it's now complete, which means that the previous commercial features in Oracle's JDK are now available in the open source version OpenJDK. So that increased the innovation and the new features in the Java platform just by making those feature sets available, and I have them listed in the next releases. So those were really like the major changes introduced over the last couple of years with the Java platform. Had anyone heard about any of those changes or aware of any of those changes? Or is that news? Well, like maybe a third of you have heard of those changes. So that starts to beg the question, so how do we kind of adapt ourselves as Java developers to this changing landscape with particularly the faster release cadence? So I put together the next few slides in terms of the last few releases, 9, 10, 11, 12, just to illustrate one particular point, which is if you look at Java 9, that was a major feature release, a major release in terms of it picked one big project in OpenJDK, which was Jigsaw, and it waited to finish until everything in Project Jigsaw was complete, and it ended up having over 100 new features in it because it was 4 years from the last release, which was Java 8. So it had 100 new features. It was actually much more than about modularity. It had some other cool things in it like JShell and REPL, but the thing that everyone thinks of it of and the thing that we tied the release timing to was Project Jigsaw. And what that means was it had over 100 new features in it, and obviously it is a major hurdle to migrate from 8 to 9, just like any previous release was, right? Most development teams would have a major project for that. It would take several months to migrate between the next new release. So Java 10 released in 2018, a little over a year ago, was our first feature release that was time-based, which means that it came out 6 months later, and it means anything that was ready in 6 months was put into the release, and it ended up being that was 12 new features, or 12 Java enhancement proposals. So as you can see, it would be quite a bit easier to migrate 12 new features versus 100 new features if you were to move from Java 9 to Java 10. One of the interesting things that you can see here, I just have a snapshot from the OpenJDK page of the Java 10 release, is JEP 286, which introduced the var keyword into the Java platform. Java 11 is the first long-term support release. It came out 6 months later, and again, whatever was ready, same thing with a long-term support release. There's no particular features that are held back or targeted for long-term support release. It's treated in the terms of new features just like any other 6-month release. Whatever's ready makes it in there. And again, with Java 11, we thought initially maybe 4 new JEPs would make it in, but as it turns out, 17 new enhancement proposals were ready for Java 11, so those were put in there. And I think the other thing that's interesting to point out is that one thing that helps to drive more things coming into the language, because that's the other question I often get, is when are we going to get some really cool new features into the platform? Obviously, that can be driven in terms of getting more external contributors. So if there's particular things that you feel like you want to work on in OpenJDK, there's the opportunity for you to join and make contributions. And I think we're trying to make an exerted effort to increase the amount of external contributions into the Java platform. So I think with Java 12 in particular, we really have started to see that increase coming forward. So with Java 12, we had Shenandoah, which was a major contribution from Red Hat, for example. So that kind of helps to show, more external contributions. It's not just about any one company. Even in evolving the Java platform, we want more external contributions. So with Java 12, that's the current release that's available today. So if you go to OpenJDK and download the current release, Java 12 is the one that you're going to get. 8 different JEPs were part of that one initially. And also, the new thing to point out with this one is with the new faster release cadence, we also introduced the idea of preview features. So switch expressions is the first preview feature, so that's available in Java 12. And it should be available in 13 as a regular feature, but introduced early as a preview feature with Java 12. So all of these things are coming out of projects developed in OpenJDK as they're ready, but rather than waiting for any one particular project to be ready. So Java 13 is being worked on now, and that will be coming out in 2019. So when you go and download the early access build, you can do that to test your applications against the early access builds. Those come out every 2 weeks, and you can use those in development, not in production. That's the way it works. So early access builds are only for testing and experimental purposes. Once the platform release goes final, you can go ahead and start your use of that in production. But one of the things that's different now is that, especially since we have a faster release cadence, it's a good best practice to go ahead and get in the habit of downloading those early access builds and evaluating your applications running against it. Whether or not you decide to move to that version in production, you can actually start to think about some of the changes that you might need to make. So really shifting in terms of moving between Java platforms to more of that agile and continuous delivery model that you probably use with your other projects, and shifting that with your Java updates, where you might have used to look at that as a discrete project that works more like, once the release is final, and you do that over a period of months. So look at it more as a thing that you do on a continuous basis. And with Java 13, we don't yet know what's going to be ready to go into it, but I put a screenshot here of some of the candidates for Java 13. There are a couple things just in the last couple of weeks that I've seen that are now targeted for the Java release such as the ZGC garbage collector. I think they've now targeted that. So this changes on an ongoing basis, what's going to be in Java 13, and if you download the early access builds, you can find out what's in there. So what happens beyond that? So we have a technical pipeline of things, and that goes on in the project. So like you probably were used to seeing in the past, those projects that would become a project release or a product platform release, those still go on. So along with the platform release pages that we have on OpenJDK, all of these projects that you would become accustomed to seeing are still ongoing in OpenJDK. These are just some of the projects going on in OpenJDK, but all of these projects are being worked on, and as things are ready coming out of each project, they will be integrated into the main line of the platform. So that means that if Project Portola, it will make it into the platform. We don't have to wait until the entire project is complete and then put it into the next platform release. As things are ready coming out of these projects, they'll be integrated. And the priorities that we're making in the platform in terms of which projects we'll work on are mapped in this way, with security being the #1 priority, but also the projects that are listed on the previous page mapped to particular problems and improvements that we're trying to make in the Java platform. So why I put this here is really, well, for your overall knowledge, but also for you to think about, are there particular areas that you're interested in or would affect your work, so that you can follow along with those in OpenJDK, because all of the projects are available for your viewing, whether you're actually contributing to them or not. They all have open mailing lists and issue trackers and downloads that are available. So if there's a particular area of interest for you, these are the projects where you can go and follow along. Each project has a project home on OpenJDK. And you can download the early access builds on jdk.java.net. You can also download the versions that's ready for production, which now we're at Java 12. But the early access builds for 13 are there, as well as project-specific builds for Panama and Valhalla. If you're interested in training and certifications, those have also been recently updated for Java 11, if you wanted to take a training course and get up to speed on the changes. So that's the Java platform changes. I told you I'd tell you about 3 things. The second part is the changes that we've made to the structure of the JCP itself. So we do that by working with the executive committee. We can't just randomly change things. So there's a lot of changes I just talked about, and we need to change the JCP to keep up with those changes. First of all, transparency. So that's why everything's available and open to you as a developer. Anyone who's a member of the public should be able to view any of these projects, view the discussions and the mailing lists, be able to download things before they're available to the public. And secondly, looking at how we can move faster, so moving to a faster release cadence and a more agile style of development. The JCP processes were originally written almost 20 years ago, back when most projects were developed in more of a waterfall cycle model, as well as in a closed proprietary fashion. So now we're operating in open source fashion and a little bit more of an agile fashion in terms of less concrete milestones and more open development periods, as well as the fact that when we started the JCP, it used to be primarily companies that were interested in involving, and now we have primarily individual developers. That's the majority of our membership and contributors into the JCP. So we've had to make those changes as well, introducing new levels of membership that make it easier for individuals to participate without necessarily having their employer's signature, as well as eliminating any fees, and then eliminating some of the oversight in the JSR process to enable JSRs to move faster to be able to deliver the platform every 6 months. So the result is that the JCP is more open than it was before, working together with the executive committee as well as getting feedback from developers who wanted to participate in the program. That's how we did it. And ending with that, so now that things are open, how is it that we can get more participation and more contributions from the community? And what we found is that working together, having groups of developers work together, we can achieve more. And we've largely found that the way you can do that is through working with Java user groups through Adopt a JSR program or more informal mechanisms like hack days. So we now have 80 Java user groups participating in the JCP, primarily as partner members, so working in conjunction with us to educate their community on the new changes that are coming out, as well as talking about some of the new features and functionality coming into the language, and getting them to actually start to download the early access builds and give their feedback to the project leaders. So participating in hack days, that's becoming more and more common. This is a picture from a hack day we did at Oracle Code 1, which is what used to be called Java 1 in San Francisco. So we continue to do those types of activities at community-based conferences, like we're going to do one next week at JBCN in Barcelona. I'll be there. Anyone going to that conference from here, by the way? Oh, one of you in the back. Okay, I'll see you there. So we'll have a hacker garden there, so you can come and participate there. But you can do them here in your local user group as well. So that's modeling after what some of the larger Java user groups have done. But even London Java user group, who has thousands of members, has found that some of their most successful and productive hack days have actually just been 5 developers getting together in a room, downloading the latest build of the platform, and giving some feedback to the project leads can be really productive. It helps the developers in terms of getting them ready, but it also helps the projects to get that feedback. So I encourage you to participate in OpenJDK. Start downloading the early access builds. Also check out the adoption group. That's a great place to get started in OpenJDK. You can check out any of the projects also that I listed that are currently being worked on as priorities. But if you're not really sure where your feedback might fit, or you're kind of looking to get started, the adoption group in OpenJDK is its own separate group, and that's a good place to get started and share any ideas that you have, as well as share feedback if you were to have a hack day. Join the adoption group discussion list and give feedback. There's also the quality outreach group, which is part of the adoption group, and that's about helping out with open source projects. So some of the tools in the ecosystem, not part of the platform, but that support the platform. So things like, a couple of examples of projects that are pretty actively engaged are Apache Maven and Eclipse Collections. So they're participating in the quality outreach program to solicit and attract new contributors to those projects. So that's another way that you could participate, either as a group or as an individual. So you probably know, one of the best ways to advance your career and gain visibility in the community is to work on open source projects. So there's a great list of open source projects that are Java-based that need help in keeping up with the new versions of the platform that don't necessarily have a corporate backer. So I hope I've given you an opportunity to see the different ways that you can help and contribute to the Java platform, either by participating in the JCP program itself, joining as a member, or just following along on the news, or also joining OpenJDK as a contributor. You can do that on OpenJDK. And if any of you have any interest in joining us at Oracle Code 1, I will be there. The call for papers is closed, but there's still registration open, so that's an opportunity for you to interact with other members of the community. Anybody planning to go to Code 1 this year in September in San Francisco? Sven's going. I'll be there. I live there. It's kind of easy for me to go there. Okay. But you could always follow along the news of things that happen there, too, on any of those channels that I shared with you. So that concludes my 30-minute talk. I think we have some questions already in a quiz structured, or I'm happy to take questions from the audience. How much time do we have for questions? Like 10 minutes? Okay, quizzes later. Muchas gracias. If anyone wants to volunteer to help me do my slides in Spanish, I actually have 3 different talks coming up in Spanish-speaking countries. So I'll be going to Colombia, Peru, and Dominican Republic later this summer. So I have set it as my personal goal to deliver more of the text of my talk in Spanish. So.
First of all, I think contributing all this code to OpenJDK is like very cool. So thank you for that. You talked a lot about Java and C, but can you give us an update about Java and C? What happens? What is going to be the future?
Yeah, Java EE is being migrated to the Eclipse Foundation. So there is a mailing list set up in the Eclipse Foundation where there's discussion happening about the future of that technology. That's called Jakarta EE. There's a working group there, so there's a mailing list there that you can join. Periodically, I ask the Eclipse Foundation to give us, updates at the executive committee meeting, and all of those materials are available on jcp.org under the EC meeting summaries. But so you can view it there too. But if you want to get involved and participate in evolving those technologies, join the mailing list on the Eclipse Foundation under Jakarta EE.
Is there any official position about from Oracle meaning?
Well, I think Oracle worked together with the community stakeholders, and that was what they decided would be the best way to move things forward. So I don't personally, my focus is solely on the JCP program, and yeah, so the focus, and that's why when I have only 30 minutes to talk, I only talk about that, because that's the future of my role, is to focus on the Java platform, making it the ideal environment, and evolving it and continuing to make it modern, and while still keeping in mind security, compatibility, in order to ensure that Java continues to be the #1 programming language into the future. Yeah. Okay.
I have one question. So what's beyond? So you talked about the Portola and Loom project. I don't know when are those scheduled for delivery.
Well, as things are ready in those projects, they'll come out over time. Like Switch Expressions is coming out of Amber, for example. So as things are ready, they'll come out.
So what are the features, or is there any things coming to Java after this project, anything that we can start seeing, or anything that's forming beyond?
Well, these projects are where a lot of the new innovations will come out of. So like, for instance, from Portola, we're doing things around optimizing Java platform for the container environments, right? So small things will come out of that as they're ready. For Project Panama, that's primarily about like big data, right? So making Java a little bit more appealing for the artificial intelligence, big data, and machine learning. So things could be coming out of that. Amber really is a collection of small language features. ZGC is one that's going to be coming out with Java 13, so a low latency garbage collector. Shenandoah already came out. So those are 2 things about improving productivity. So making Java work better, more in a Java native environment. There's things coming out of that in terms of replacement for JNI, so that's being worked on actively. Also Project Loom, so kind of an update to the concurrency model for Java that's new. So I think the goal with Project Loom is to have millions of fibers spawning into a single JVM instance. So that's the ultimate outcome of Project Loom. There's also a project called Project Metropolis, which is bringing in aspects of the Graal JVM and compiler. So I think the Java pipeline is pretty deep in terms of things that are being worked on just on this screen in terms of the projects. These are the ones I pulled out that I think maybe you can start to see things coming in sooner, but there are other ones, new ones that will be added over time. Valhalla, I think, is maybe one of the more major things coming out, but I don't think that's going to be ready for 13 yet, but it's actively being worked on. So if you wanted to see maybe more about the direction, you should go and check out Valhalla, and Valhalla is one of those that also has its own early access builds available, so you could see where they're at in terms of introducing JEPs. I don't think they're not even at that stage yet of introducing JEPs in terms of object data layout, but they will be. They're actively working on prototypes and discussing different options with Valhalla, and you can follow along those discussions to see more about what the direction is. So hope that answers your question. Okay, I think we should switch it over to Sven's talk now. Okay, and then we'll do the quiz at the end. Okay. And then again, yeah.